Thank you for being so patient. So intros are done. Ellen, were you able to introduce yourself?
I was. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, now I'm just going to dive into some questions. And for those who were kind of kicked out of the meeting, we'll make sure they get the recording. So with fresh start, we'll go from here. So one of the questions we received pre-meeting was, these are independent restaurants, single unit, and it's very, budgets are small. So when you're talking about restaurant marketing, a few of the restaurants say that they'll go out and somebody says, oh, I can do restaurant consulting for you, but it's going to be $40,000 or something astronomical that they might not take on. So where can people start as an independent restaurant? What's the biggest bang for their buck, and where should they start for marketing? Whoever wants to dive in. Do you always need an expensive consultant, or what can you do on your own, or a more economical way to do it?
I'll start. I think one of the most cost-effective ways to market an independent restaurant where your focus is really a very small radius of people who are going to be coming in and spending their money with you, and choosing you over competitors in your market is social media. I mean, it's social media and spending money with social media, which is actually very essential now to be seen, is the most cost-effective way to market your restaurant. And the way that you're able to target your budget on social media, which could be as little as $20 for a social media post, you can get exponential more eyes on what you're doing. And you pair that with quality content with a call to action. I feel that that's probably the best use of a smaller budget for a hyper local campaign.
Yeah, I'll jump in there as well, and I'll speak to kind of what we've done at Mendocino Farms and continue to do today, because I do, just like Kristin says, I think social media is really important. But I think the interesting part is with independents, where you're really looking at the 1 to 2 mile radius, you've got people all around you. And so we do a lot of viral marketing, events where we're inviting people into the restaurants. I think giving away free food and having people taste your food, experience your food, whether it be offsite, driving people into your restaurant, is what we found to be very impactful. And then coupling that with social media, so they're also generating content for you and getting the word out. We call them key connectors. So, generally for a new store opening, or even when we first started, we would find like 10 to 20 of what we call our key connectors, like influential people who are very connected, and it's all defined when you talk about influential people. It's not really about celebrities. It's about real people who actually go out and eat and feed their families, feed themselves. And we will basically make them our ambassadors, and we'll ask them, hey, we'll throw a party for you, invite your friends, we'll do different events, but it's all about the free food. And yeah.
Give examples of a key connector from Mendocino Farms. Is that like just a family who's like very involved in the schools? Or
yeah, so for us, that's a big part of it, because giving back. So we will work with all the local, and we usually start with preschools and elementary schools, because we find that that audience is really the one that's making all the decision making, the parents are, and they can still get the kids to come in with you. So we would work and we call and find out who the PTA president is and who the fundraising person is. And then they become kind of like our spokesperson for that school. And then literally you're talking to one person who is inviting probably 500 to 1,000 people, right, to your restaurants. They're the ones that are, driving the messaging, the communications, and we really treat them like VIPs. It's almost like the Lululemon ambassadors. Well, we'll give them free food. We'll give them a certificate to celebrate their kid's birthday. So now, they're promoting your catering for you. So it's really that kind of guerrilla marketing. And then then we couple it with social media and ask them to really promote, tag. We'll work with social media, like we'll find micro influencers between like 1 to 3K, where they're not really asking for money still. They're actually just asking, they want to build their fan base. So, we give them food to give away. We let them do contests. And that for us has been a very cost-effective way to be able to do things within a 1 to 2 mile radius.
So the influencers who have 1,000 to 3,000 followers.
And sometimes they're smaller, but it all depends. It has to be aligned with, their interest, your food. Usually, for us, we're a little bit more health conscious. So we'll look at health and wellness. So it'll be direct and indirect influencers, but it's just, they're able to target like-minded people.
I would add on to that, which I agree completely with all of those different tactics and ways to get into the community. But I would also back up and think about the clarity and consistency around the restaurant's position in the market, and assuming that that piece is very clear and is shared throughout the restaurant so that all employees understand everybody's singing from the same song sheet. It's also important to then look at the trade area. And if it's a business community, high traffic office building and employees coming in and out, the restaurant needs to be sure to have the right tools and set up the menu and packaging and walkways, all of those things, so that you can satisfy and over deliver to that particular group. And I think oftentimes there's an assumption that it's a stop shop, and the restaurant will meet the neighborhood community as well as the business community as well as the tourist community. And I think that's where sometimes restaurants get off track, because they're trying to do everything for everyone and missing the real opportunity of the core group of people that are going to be your repeat customers and come back over and over again. Make sure those guests are satisfied. And if not, figure out what it is. It might be a small tweak. It could be the packaging of the salads. It's just not convenient, and the dressing always spills, or whatever it is. It seems silly, but to me, those are very critical elements of marketing that I think oftentimes gets overlooked or not really thought about as a marketing, a piece of the marketing plan. And then the other point I was going to make is sit down with your employees on a regular basis. And if not you, have someone come in and sit down with them for 2 hours and just let them share what's working, what's not. There's nobody better. They're close to the customers. And I've done hundreds of those and feel like that is truly the best marketing idea generation that you can really do. And it's free. Well, it's the cost of their time, but what you get out of it is far more beneficial than starting to go out and market the restaurant.
And can I just ask a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
How, for like an independent restaurant who maybe wants to start engaging employees in marketing, how would you go about setting that up? And what kind of questions do you ask? Is it like a 20-minute team meeting every 2 weeks? Is it like a big thing? How do you set those up?
Well, what's worked well for me is to take a group of employees off-site. Maybe it's for breakfast before the restaurant opens, if that works for you and your teams. And I have a series of questions that I ask at every single meeting. And so it's, what's working on the menu? What menu items do you see are left on the plate more often than not if you're dining in? What's the number one request you get? Where do you find our guests are coming from? I mean, you can come up with a list of questions and ask those same questions over and over, and you're going to see common themes drawing out. We get requests to have ketchup in the restaurant. I know you don't want to have it, but those are little things, but can make an enormous difference.
I like the idea of also taking them off site, or kind of like a little perk, because that also goes back to culture and making the team feel like they're part of the concept.
Yes, absolutely.
I think it's interesting. And Sarah, I love that, because I think one of the things we did too, because our GMs and our managers and even our team members at times were like, I don't know what I'm looking out for, really. And so what we started doing was creating kind of like a one-sheeter of how to approach our guests and what to ask, to do it in a uncomfortable way, because a lot of them were uncomfortable to even go up to the tables to talk to the guests. So we created kind of a one-sheeter to train them on how to best go about that, and kind of what data that they're trying to glean. So it's not just I touch the table and I ask an open question. And then with that, they really gather that information so that when we do have, we call them our look backs,
Look
they
that.
really are able to provide us with intel that helps, and then helps them start stoking ideas of what they can do. Because I do, it's like what Sarah said, I think letting them and empowering them really be the marketers of their restaurants really makes a difference on the connections they make with the people in the neighborhood.
What kind of questions are you asking on that one sheet for your look?
So we will always say, you know, like, thank you so much. Like, you know, first it'll be like the conversation of just welcome and thank you so much for coming. We'll usually ask, do you live or work in the neighborhood? Because that takes two different routes. If you work in the neighborhood, to what Sarah is saying, that's a whole nother different, we do a lot of catering. So then we start talking about like, oh, what do you do there? Do you guys cater? Then we know they probably just eat here for lunch. If they live in the neighborhood, then there's a whole nother path you can take. If we see them in workout clothes, so there's little things about just the person. It's like, oh, do you work out in the neighborhood? Where do you work out? And then if it looks like, you know, it's a mom with the kids, hey, where do you guys go to school? So those are the nuggets that you're actually getting to be able then to put together a really thoughtful marketing plan. So it's, you know, and then they have a database that they go to. The other thing we have is for our team member, it goes back to more culture, is we're about like building relationships and this idea of selling happy. And so our team members wear lanyards, which, you know, most people are like, why do you make them wear lanyards? It's their name. But in there is a relationship card. So as they're talking to people and they start to like really understand the guest, they put the name down of the guest, and then they put like something about them. So now it's we call them connecting the dot, like collecting dots. Then they become really your friends and you're their advocate. And there's this relationship that you're building. So, you know, now there's this deeper connection that you can make with them. So.
Great. And I did want to get Daisy's feedback as well. I know we kind of evolved the conversation, but what can like cost-effective marketing tactics for an independent restaurant? What would be your advice?
I completely agree with what Sarah and Ellen has said. I think it's really important to start with understanding the trade area and who's around you, who's living around you, who's working around you. I think it's definitely great to tap into employees, not only to ask them what are some of the things that are working and not working, but also ask them when they live nearby, how are you being reached by other businesses? I found that our employees really give us ideas of what either newspapers or magazines or events to participate in, because a lot of times they're living in that community and they're looking to get information and news from other businesses too. So a lot of the times that's where we look into where to start first. And I think it's really helpful there, because once you understand your market and then you want to get started on doing marketing initiatives, I completely understand that as an individual business, it's kind of hard to figure out where to put your money. And so in my perspective, it's best to take that information from your employees and then be calculated about your marketing efforts versus doing everything at once, because then you're kind of distracted and trying to spread yourself thin. But then you're also, it's difficult to evaluate which marketing efforts paid off for you or what resulted from different initiatives. So I really think it's great when you are being calculated and try one thing at a time, and then you get the
feedback of it,
evaluate
or not. Yeah, that's great. I did want to ask, since we brought up social media, I know this is so huge. A lot of people are asking, do you need to have your own social media person, like a dedicated staff member? Do you pay a current staff member to take pictures? Like what's the best way to manage your social media presence? Anyone could start.
I think that as a business owner, it really depends on what your strengths are as an individual. I think that the creativity that you have as a business owner or a restaurant owner you can really bring that to life really vividly on social media. But also there's some restaurant owners that are just not interested in, that's not what they like to do. And that's completely fine too. I think it's recognizing what you like to do and what you're good at, And if that's not something you want to do, then maybe it is something you pay an employee, team member with, or someone who's studying that in school as an inexpensive option, or also reach out to other local businesses. I think that there are many times when consulting is expensive, but there's also other local options where I feel you have to feel okay with trying different contractors, but also walking away when it doesn't work, but giving it enough time to nurture it, whether or not it's going to be a good fit, versus trying it for a week and then moving on to someone else and saying, social media never worked for me, or all social media consultants are just overpriced.
Got it.
I would add to that, and social media is clearly, I think, the best tool to use, but I would again take a step back and not assume that everybody should jump right into that. I look at social media as a guest relations tool, and it's really communicating what the guests want to know about. And it's hard to do, but really try hard not to just tell and tell and tell, like this new menu item, this, new promotion, this event, etc. I think that is where it gets very blurry and you just get lost in the sea of sameness. So A, I would evaluate whether or not getting into social media is the right thing, and B, making sure that you have a thoughtful tone and voice and personality that comes across in whatever communications that you are sharing.
And so to get away, and Kristin or Ellen, you can jump in on this one, but to get away from being that advertising of like new menu item, like Sarah's saying, or you're just like one way, how do you build that relationship or quality content that people can relate to? What are you sharing?
Yeah. Go ahead, Kristin.
Okay, when it comes to restaurant, food is king. So investing in good quality food photography is very, very important. And while those posts may be your highest performing, it's really, really important that you're injecting community, personality, really humanizing your brand via social media. So before you start anything, whether it's social or local store marketing or, whatever it is, it's just so important to understand your brand. So really taking that time to sit down and figure out, who are you, the whys, why should people care, what makes you unique, why are you different from competitors? Because ultimately you're convincing people to spend their hard-earned money with you, versus the restaurant down the street. So I just wanted to add that make sure that you understand who you are, and whether it's you managing your social or someone at your restaurant, making sure that they have that direction. There should be a tone, a personality, things that you do different, that your key messages that you want to keep hammering in everything that you do, whether it's you use local ingredients or you support a local cause. And then social media is such a great listening tool, because ultimately you want to be tying into what your customers care most about. So really, really take the time to figure out who you are and the unique value that you're bringing to your community, whether it's in a cuisine that no one else is offering, or highlighting your employees in a really creative way.
Oh, yeah.
Find some ways to stand out and not just be pushing content down people's throat. So it's a good mix of the food and all of the whys, why people should care about you.
The food and the whys. I love that. That's really good. And food photography, you're so right. Ellen, did you look like you were going to chime in?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think that's what I feel like that's the most important thing, is backing it all the way up. And I think one of the easiest, I don't want to say it's the easiest, the one thing that you could really sit down with your team to do is figure out the who, like the positioning of like, what do you want to be known for? And then from a brand perspective, it's like, what is that emotional connection you want with your guests, right? And I think that from a four walls to online really should be seamless, because sometimes you'll see like someone's social media is really shiny and pretty because, you know, they're getting all this great content, but then you go into their restaurant and there's like a mismatch. Or, you know, I'll speak for Mendo. We had this great culture and this great, you know, we could talk about ourselves all day long within the four walls, but our social just really wasn't like, you know, we weren't into really the social part of it. There was a huge disconnect. And so we really had to go and figure out, like, how do we make that connection four wall with social, saying the same thing, but in a different, you know, way. And so that way people really, like, it's a seamless transition from, and usually people are really shopping and eating with you first online before they even walk into your store at this point. But I think from like, so I think going back to, you know, what Kristin is saying, really understanding your why and being able to articulate that and then translating that into digital. But I think it's most important to define it and then define it with your team as well, so everyone really gets that. And, you know, I look at it from, yeah, so I think that's the most important thing, is define who you are and then just make sure that that message matches. The other thing too, from content, because I know your last question was, do you need a person to do?
Yeah.
What we relied on the most, because we had a very small budget and we had a person who kind of did it part of their time, right, was we would rely on UGC, so user generated content. And I mean, it's amazing what people can do with their iPhones. And so I think that's a really great way to actually get content for your social in the beginning. And it's third party, you know, you're not really talking about yourself. You're also able to tag that person, and that person's like stoked on your brand and they become your ambassadors of, you know, whoever.
Gives it more legitimacy.
Yeah, so I think that's a really great way to get content and to talk about your brand in a very efficient way in the beginning.
That's great. And what we've been hearing in all of these Zoom sessions that we do is we always have a topic, right? It could be on workers' comp, it could be on, you know, legal, marketing, whatever we do. Everything comes down to, how are you empowering your team? Every single conversation has been to culture and building that culture. So no matter if you're talking about marketing your restaurant or getting your workers' comp claims down, it all is coming down to your team and how you've invested in them and foster that culture. Daisy?
So when I wanted to add something about using social media, but finding ways to connect with your guests too. One of the things that we've seen really pay off is really responding to all of the questions, comments, and all of the engagements you're getting on each of the platforms. Sometimes you're getting comments on your posts, sometimes they're direct messages. And so it's really just responding to them or engaging in a conversation. When you post a picture of one of your products and they say, I love this, or I can't wait to go, you can respond with something playful where it just shows your guests or those people who are following you on social media that you are listening and that they can engage with you. One of the other things I think is worth experimenting for businesses is with the micro influencers that you're working with. We've had great success where the ones you're continuing to work with and you start building that relationship with, we tap into them to create some of our kind of like mini photo shoots, but the cost of them are a lot more affordable than photography that you're going to use for signage or other marketing channels. And it really just gives you a lot more content, and it just freshes up your social media posts.
Yeah, that's a great idea, right? Put your customers to work for you and they'll love it because they love your brand.
Yeah.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to cover two important topics. The first I'll start with is local media, and I'll hit that off to Kristin first. And then the second is review sites, right? And making sure that they reflect the quality of your brand. So Kristin, you are the queen of PR and getting coverage. And I mean, you've gotten us in the LA Times and KTLA. I mean, you're just amazing at getting these brands, earned media, right? So how can an independent restaurant go about engaging with local media and getting their story told?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to understand what your local media market is. Some of them are pretty small depending on where you're at. And there's the LA DMA, which covers every restaurant in Los Angeles, Orange County, and the Inland Empire, which is massive. So it's really important to understand which media outlets will cover your area where you are located. And then, PR has to be timely. So you have to, it has to tie in with a season or a specific time period, or just something shiny and new that you're doing. So if you're, launching a brand new menu, or if you're for Christmas or Thanksgiving, or you're partnering with another, restaurant or local vendor to do something unique. What else? Or
holidays. You're always talking about food holidays too.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. There's a food holiday for everything. And I thought for sure media is not going to be interested one day, but they still are. There's National Pasta Day, National Burger Day, National Everything Day. So creating kind of novelty, gimmicky items is something that the media likes to see because it's different, but also how you're contributing to your community. So anything cause related that you're doing is also of interest to the media. So once you figure out who your local media is, it's just kind of keeping them in the know of anything new and exciting that you're doing. It couldn't be necessarily, it's not about we're here, check us out. It's about something new and excited and date driven, really time driven that you're doing, that you have to tie into.
Great. Anybody else have some feedback on how to get into local media or get local media coverage? Sarah?
We've had good success with food holidays as well. And I think as an individual business owner, it makes sense to really research what are the publications nearby, those stations nearby, to try to build that relationship. Because I think without that, it is going to be a little tough for you to get them to cover your story or about your products or whatever it is events you're doing. I think you have to establish that relationship first, or else that coverage is going to be really difficult to come by.
Absolutely.
Oh, I was just going to add one thing that worked well at the beginning of the pandemic was the Great American Takeout, and that ended up when I started that, it was really bring more restaurants together to participate. So the premise is we all win when we all win. So, I mean, it's really bring as many people into the fold, or many restaurants, companies, and promote as a collective group. And that's just took off city to city and became a national story, which started as just let's promote takeout and see who else will join us. So don't hesitate to bring in your competitors. Again, if they win, you win.
That
was an awesome campaign. That was amazing. Every single one of my restaurant clients, we got them on board. Why not?
And thank you, because it was happening so fast and it was crazy. But to see Coke and Pepsi even joining in, which you can get your supplier partners to be a part of this, the message was, help us all. But I think the lesson from that is what I just mentioned is don't just think about your restaurant as you on your own. Mm-hmm. Look at your block, look at your, entire neighborhood. Who else can you join forces with? Because you're obviously more powerful together than you are individually.
That's great.
That's like the Grateful Table Dine Out, what we're doing now is like that on a smaller scale.
Exactly. Yeah. All restaurants together, and you're helping all restaurants. I love that idea because I think when you start thinking about marketing your restaurant, you're thinking about my one restaurant, my menu, what do I want to sell, which is going to have a smaller reach than if you did like the downtown block of restaurants is doing this promotion or something together where you might have more media muscle.
Yeah, we also turned that idea when I was working with Veggie Grill for as their interim CMO. We tried to emulate the Great American Takeout and make it a plant-based event, but yet not just solely focus on plant-based restaurants. So we called it the Plant-Based Party, and the mission was just dine out and enjoy a plant-based meal anywhere, whether it's even at home, so it just starts the conversation and gives you something to talk about that isn't just come in.
Yeah.
And that also took on a life of its own because so many more people are eating plant-based diets, and then it just escalated from there. So there's lots of ways that you can come up with things to get you in the news. It's just not necessarily what you may immediately think of when you're pitching a story.
Yeah, that's great. And it's about, how can you remain relevant, and tying into trends and topical pieces that, people are talking about at the moment. So really you need to, keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world and see if there's a way that, you can organically tie in your restaurant and be part of a larger story.
And just to add on to that, I think one of the interesting things too is sometimes it's daunting to even reach out to the local. You're like, how do I even go about doing that? Because usually there's a publicist somewhere that is your liaison. And again, I go back to we worked without publicists for forever. And I think one of the things we did was always drop off free food.
Yeah, I know that.
We would drop off food at the local paper, the local news station, whatever it was, even from the very beginning, and establishing that baseline relationship, because it's not about pitching. It's really about feeding and like sharing what we do with them. And then from there, really thinking about it from a calendaring perspective because I know there's always the lead time because they're already pitching stuff and thinking about stuff. So really looking at like seasonality, looking at the food holidays, we always have like National Sandwich Day, and we'd be thinking about things we wanted to do in November all the way in the summertime. So so we've always we pre-plan versus, oh wait, this is a great idea, I'm going to pitch it, because chances are they're probably already going to have something that they're airing, that week already for it. So I think it's really important to be able to plan and be thoughtful about how you're reaching out to them.
Yeah, typically when you're reacting versus being proactive, it's too late.
Yeah.
And so the last question, I do want everyone to have a final thought too, but the last question is managing your presence on review sites. Do you have some suggestions for that? I know that's, people visit Yelp before they even check out a restaurant these days. That's where they check out the menu first. So any suggestions or advice on how to have the best presence on those sites? Or responding to negative feedback, however you want to address that.
We literally respond to every single negative or positive. And generally we focus on the negatives, and the negatives are even 3-star reviews and all the way down. We usually take them offline and we'll DM them. And we have a guest relations person that is really focused on reaching out, making sure that we take care of the situation. We send them, we call them our Eat Happy cards. So for any experience that really is not awesome, we will send them an Eat Happy card and make sure that, they're taken care of. And generally, I will have to say, when you respond to them, they're just happy to be heard, that they'll come back and usually rate you again. We've made even our biggest haters become our, biggest fans we had this one guy who he always had a complaint about our salads. So we ended up making him our secret shopper. We said, hey, you know what? We hear you. And this
I love that.
So we let him do, we gave him, for the year, a bunch of comp cards. And we're like, the only thing we ask is just let us know how your experience was, but go and eat for free. So really we focus on that. And then the ones that are positive, of course, we'll say thank you or whatever, but it's really, we focus on the negatives to turn them around and create, we call them raving fans. This is everything from Instagram, Facebook, wherever, but anything, we're always responding. It's super important to us.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's starting small, claiming your pages, making sure your content is, the information is correct.
Yeah.
trying on maybe on a quarterly basis, making sure you're refreshing information. Sometimes we don't have new news, but it's still, maybe I'll swap the pictures, or I'm going to have the same message, but I'm going to rewrite the paragraph, just so that the search engines are seeing that you're taking care of your pages and that you're active. And then it is using them again for two-way communication with your guests. And I completely agree with, whenever possible, take it offline so that it's something that other customers aren't seeing. And then hopefully you're able to get them to change their reviews when they are negative.
Yeah, and Santos said he has a love-hate relationship with Yelp. I think every restaurant feels that way. It's so easy to leave a negative comment, right? But it really takes a lot to leave a positive one.
Well, I think their model has changed so much, and the advertiser is getting priority. And I think that it's becoming less relevant than it was when it started out, and people knew it was more authentic. So I think over time, if they don't, gain back the trust of restaurants, it's a slippery slope. But I agree with everything you, Daisy and Ellen, with regard to what you said, how you handle it. I think about it as guests in my home, and if someone left and said they hated their dinner at our house, you'd handle it in a certain way, and it's the same thing Ellen's talking about.
And if you're, as an independent restaurant, if you don't need to be giving away free food necessarily, if that's just not within your budget or your means. But just like the rest of these women said, it's about acknowledging them, making sure that they feel heard. And sometimes that can be enough. And if they're reasonable, then, they'll really appreciate that. But they're not always reasonable. And there's some people that are just impossible to please. And that's kind of the name of the game. But acknowledge and do it as quickly as possible, because I guarantee the longer you let them stew, if they're angry, they're just going to be more difficult to convert back.
So I think this was a really good piece of advice, this little section. So I'm hearing you need to make sure your platforms are updated. There's nothing worse than coming and your hours are off, right? And like Daisy said, refreshing quarterly so you know what's out there and what your brand is. Responding timely, and then turning your haters into your biggest fans and addressing their needs and acknowledging it. And I love that secret shopper idea. I love that one. I hope people take that one on. Okay, so to wrap up, I'd like each of the panelists to share one nugget. If you were going to say one piece of advice on independent restaurant marketing and how to get that traffic, what would be your one nugget? Who wants to take it?
My number one is know your brand. Really think about who you are and how you do things differently, and why people should choose to spend their money with you, whether it's because you invest in your people, or because you're putting out high quality, exciting cuisine that you can't find anywhere else nearby, or because you support the causes that they care about. Really, really spend some time figuring out who you are.
Soul
For
searching.
me, it would be focus on creating a consistent brand experience, whether it's with your team members, whether it's on your social media pages, whether it is through the drive-through, or for takeout orders, or for customers coming in to eat in. I think it's really understanding what are the different channels and really focusing, working hard to create a cohesive brand experience. So you're building that equity and that memory with your guests.
Completely agree. That was what I was going to say. Just stay obsessed about the details, and the details are basically everything that you just outlined. It's not going out to market, it's starting inside and making sure everything within the four walls are right before you go out.
Obsessed about the details. I like that.
I totally agree. I mean, everything that you guys have said, and it's just really define your purpose. And I think a big part of it is invest in your people and train.
Train. Yeah, I guess that's true. Right? So you have great marketing, but they come in and have a horrible experience with the employee.
Because your culture really defines who you are. And I think that translates into marketing and your brand. And so building that culture and knowing who you are, just like Kristin said, is super, to us, has always been very important, the core of what we do.
I love thinking about training as part of marketing. I love that extension because that makes total sense. They're the people who are going to be interfacing with your guests. All right. Well, I apologize for the technical difficulties. We missed some of our guests today, but we will make sure the recording is sent to everyone right after this meeting. I think we got the meat of the content. So thank you so much, ladies, for all of your time and your expertise in giving us something to think about. I'll say this on this recording so everybody knows it. We will not be having a December Resilience Fund meeting because it's the holidays and you're all hopefully very slammed, hopefully very busy. So we'll resume in January with our session in January will be about 2022 basics. We're going to go over new regulations, laws, what you have to be set for 2022. And we'll have an attorney and a government relations person joining us for that. So you'll get the scoop on that. So enjoy the rest of 2021. You made it. 2022 is going to be even better, and especially if we start using some of these marketing tactics. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks for sticking with us. Bye.
Bye.
Analysts, you're amazing.
Thanks. Bye.